You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Welcome to Force 13 Live. We're covering the Atlantic disturbances and Hurricane Fiona over the course of this hour. We're going to be going in depth to talk about them live here ahead of more extended coverage coming up tonight on Hurricane Fiona that we expect to be running. It just passed Bermuda not long ago and is back up to a Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale at 130 miles per hour. That is the maximum speed that the hurricane has reached across the last few days, when it did peak earlier on, and now it's reached another peak at the same intensity. 130 mile per hour winds, that's sustained winds, and a pressure of 936 millibars. Hurricane warnings out for Atlantic Canada, and it's approaching there with enormous ferocity. I was looking through some archives, through the database, and found that the strongest ever landfall in Atlantic Canada was the remnants or extratropical stage of Hurricane Luis in 1995, which made landfall with winds of 120 miles per hour on Newfoundland. The strongest storm made landfall in Nova Scotia on record, I think, was about 105 miles per hour. And this storm is probably going to beat that. I think it was Juan was the one that might have been 105. Certainly was a Category 2 at any rate. Fiona has the potential to make landfall with Category 3 force winds of 115 miles per hour, or at least 110. So is likely to be the strongest landfall on record to occur in Nova Scotia. Landfall is expected in the very late hours of tonight, early hours of tomorrow morning, and it's going to be an extreme event, and we don't say that lightly here. We also have Tropical Depression 9, which is that area down there near the bottom in the Caribbean Sea, and that is obviously one that a lot of people are eyeing. The National Hurricane Center's latest cone now expect it to be a major 5 days from now, and for it to be extremely close to the coast of Florida, I believe. Let me just get an update on that and show you. I've not seen the cone myself yet, I've just heard what people have been saying. Hopefully we get it to load. That's the wrong one. I'm just loading this in the background. But we'll speak to our team in a moment as well. I just wanted to show this cone first. That is the latest cone for Tropical Depression 9, expecting a hurricane, then a major hurricane, into Florida on Wednesday. That could still change, but as we go along, the chance of deviation starts to decrease. And there's the cone for Fiona. 130 mile an hour winds right now, moving northeast at 35 miles per hour, running down those miles as it approaches Canada. Bermuda still got a tropical storm warning. It's just about to leave tropical storm conditions by the looks of it. And we believe, according to the Bermuda Weather Service, they got 100 knot winds. Wind gusts. That's 115 miles per hour. Let's introduce my team then in this hour of discussion. We're joined by lots of people. We've got David in Texas, Ethan, Christian, Marlene, and Tim. Let's first talk to Ethan. You've got a lot of our viewpoints right now. Walk us through it.
Well, we got imagery up of the incredible Hurricane Fiona right now, speeding its way off towards the northeast right now, with an estimated movement right now of 35 miles per hour. As Nathan said, Fiona is forecast to make landfall what looks to be early tomorrow morning as a post-tropical cyclone with Category 2 equivalent winds. It will move quickly inland, and then it will slow down a little bit, and then it will eventually emerge off of northern Canada. But regardless, hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings, maybe even a few tropical storm watches that are in place for a large part of interior northeast Canada. And this threat is very large regarding Fiona. That is.
There's so much to track right now. Fiona, 9L Gaston, of course, which is on the right-hand side there, affecting the Azores right now with tropical storm winds, and newly designated Tropical Depression 10 as well.
Yeah, so I just wanted to go over the watches and warnings right now for Fiona, if you
Sure.
don't mind. There's a lot of them. So right now, a hurricane warning is in effect for Nova Scotia from Hubbard's to Brule, Prince Edward Island, Isle de la Madeleine, Newfoundland, from Parsons Pond to François. A tropical storm warning is in effect for Bermuda, St. Andrews, New Brunswick to west of Hubbard's, Nova Scotia, west of Brule, Nova Scotia to Cap Madeline, Quebec, Anticosti Island, Sheldrake, Quebec to north of Parsons Pond, Newfoundland, Boat Harbor to Hare Bay, Newfoundland, Francois to St. Lawrence, Newfoundland, and a tropical storm watch is in effect for north of Boat Harbor, Newfoundland to West Bay, Labrador. A hurricane warning means that hurricane conditions are expected somewhere within the warning area, in this case within the next 24 to 36 hours. Preparations to protect life and property should be rushed to completion, as this storm is really much going to be in the backyards of many locations within 24 hours, if not more, whenever tropical storm conditions will probably start impacting these regions.
Yep, so lots of watches and warnings, as you can see here on the National Hurricane Center's cone as well. Let's just get another look at Tropical Depression 9 right now, and there it is. Certainly got that circulation, but the convection appears to be quite far away from it, Ethan.
Yeah, this storm is still dealing with some wind shear right now. Some wind shear is still coming out of the north, primarily due to Fiona's outflow. But this wind shear, as the system moves off towards the west, is forecast to decrease quite substantially. And as such, the National Hurricane Center does forecast intensification up here. Like I said yesterday on the previous streams, once the storm gets near and west of Jamaica, it's going to intensify quite dramatically. You can see here 50 miles per hour forecast just south of Jamaica, then going up to winds of 70 miles per hour, and then maybe even into a Category 1 hurricane with winds of 85 miles per hour. Maybe making landfall in Cuba as a Category 2. I think this is actually quite conservative for a forecast in this area, but we'll have to wait and see. Then intensifying up to a Category 2, and then, as you said, Nathan, a major hurricane making landfall in Florida. I'm very concerned about this major hurricane landfall if it verifies, because you can see here, if a major hurricane comes up in this area, this entire area is very, and I mean very heavily populated. So this could be a really bad situation for this kind of area if this forecast verifies.
In there anyway.
We try not to home in on that, though. It's a large cone. There's a whole massive area there, and the center could pass anywhere within that cone. That includes completely east of Florida.
Yeah, I'll turn on the forecast models, and you can see the National Hurricane Center are still on the eastern side of things as far as the model guidance goes. Model guidance is actually a little bit west of their forecast. I'm a bit shocked that they didn't shift westward this advisory. Personally, I would have, but that's just the National Hurricane Center's point of view.
All right, let's go over to Tim. You're showing us what the... Oh, you were showing us what the Canadian Hurricane Center was saying. Ah, there it is.
I do have it. Yeah, I do have that backed up, Nathan.
Tell us about it.
Okay, so this is the information that is being issued by the Canadian Hurricane Center. This is based in Halifax. They do work in conjunction with the National Hurricane Center with their advisories. And right now they are calling for a 155 kilometer per hour landfall on the northeastern side of Halifax just before it goes through extratropical transition and takes it right in through the waterway between what that would be New Brunswick and the Labradors, and still keeps it a pretty significant system, still almost hurricane force by the time it does get to probably within 80 to 100 kilometers south of the Labrador mainland.
Yeah, believe it or not, Nova Scotia is actually already seeing impacts from Fiona, and it's more than 24 hours away. I've got Canadian rainfall up on central Nova Scotia here, Nathan, and heavy rainfall moving through Nova Scotia already. 24 hours in advance or more of this hurricane making landfall.
That's quite impressive, and this is another view about how that's happening. And you can see there those bands on the western side really being stretched northwards now and reaching the Canadian Maritimes quite clearly. So decent amount of rainfall there already falling. Checking back at that radar there and into Newfoundland too.
Yeah, this system is already impacting these areas. But moving on in our tropics tour, here's Gaston, still moving very slowly near the Azores with a wind of 65 miles per hour. Still tropical storm warnings in effect for all of the Azores. I don't think that we don't need to go over this too badly because it's not going to be that big of a storm over there. And here's the cone for newly formed Tropical Depression 10. A lot of people in the weather community already think this is already a tropical storm, so it may be getting a tropical storm designation very soon.
Do they? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it is.
I agree with you. I think it is too.
Basically, right now it's a race between 9 and 10. Which one's going to get named first?
Yeah. But you can see the National Hurricane Center does forecast brief intensification up to tropical storm intensity for about 24 hours before weakening ensues. It's going to be very short-lived as this system pushes out towards the north, and in 10 minutes will eventually curve back out to sea and won't do anything. But this is 4 tropical cyclones active at once in the Atlantic. When's the last time that we had this seen in the Atlantic?
Probably wasn't that long ago,
Not long
considering
ago.
recent seasons.
Oh. I think what's got me interested in 10, Nathan, is its current location just to the east of 20 degrees west. I'm not sure we've had too many storms form that far east.
We certainly haven't. I don't know exactly how many, but it is quite far east.
Yeah, I know that we had, what was it? I think it was it 10L back in 2020? I think that was the number. That'd be quite funny. That'd be quite funny if it was. Let me just do some research
I think
here.
you're right.
But did I remember 10L get a name then at that time, though?
No, it did not. There was I think it was 10L.
Yeah, there was a debate over that.
Same area, actually. But it's not too uncommon, but that was in late July, early August. That one back in 2020. But I'm just trying to think of like some other storms I remember forming in this area. I know that Fred 2015 formed in this area.
That's right.
I think Fred was 21 or 20.8 west. I thought there was another one that was a little bit closer to 20 west that got designated. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. It was been recent too.
And we had 15 and 19 that moved to the Cape Verde Islands of that tropical depression.
Anyway, fascinating, but probably not the main subject right now. But it is another development in the Atlantic hurricane season, which is taking another twist and turn as we continue to watch the storms. But this is the main stage right now in front of us. You can see Fiona there in the northern part of the Atlantic, moving along. Perhaps initial stages of extratropical transition now being noted.
Yeah, extratropical transition has begun, Nathan. How fast it completes this transition, we have to wait and see. Current thinking is that it will be somewhat fast, but it takes time to get going. And that front that I said at the end of last night's stream has now finally caught up to Fiona. I think I can actually turn on the front on my software. I just gotta find it. There it is. And we can see where this front is. Yeah, look at that. Right in that front now.
Yes.
Yeah, that front is pulling Fiona up into Canada now, and that should help it turn post-tropical. But it's also this front that it's riding is also kind of a blessing in disguise. It's what we call a jet interaction, where the front here can actually aid in some tropical cyclone intensification, and that's what we're actually seeing here. And that's probably why Fiona has intensified. I think Recon, Tim, got like what 145 knot flight level winds, which is Category 5.
They did on their initial pass, Ethan, but that was their first pass. Recon just went through there. I was actually just taking a look at that as you were bringing it up. And their last northeast to southwest pass had peak winds of 124 knots. But what's interesting to note is surface level winds were only 55 to 60 knots in that sampling area. So,
That's a forest?
yeah.
What?
That's strange.
The only thing I could think of was maybe they missed the center of the storm on this pass because the previous pass, which was a northwest to southeast, did get those stronger winds. And yeah, there was easily 1, 2, 3, 4. There was easily 5 data points from that pass on the southeast side of the storm where we did have what would be considered Category 5 flight level winds. And their latest pass did have pressure extrapolated down to about 937.8 millibars. So this is still a very powerful system in its current phase.
Absolutely. National Hurricane Center have actually published a graphic, Nathan, on the key messages of 9L. If you don't mind, I can go over those real quick.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is what they say. The depression is said to produce heavy rainfall and instances of flash flooding and possible land mudslides in areas of higher terrain in Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao, I think is how you pronounce it. Heavy rains are also likely to spread into Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and Cuba in the coming days. 9L is expected to approach Jamaica as a tropical storm on Sunday and the Cayman Islands as a hurricane on Monday. Watches to these locations may be required later today and or on Saturday, not Sunday.
I'll help you with that pronunciation, Ethan. Those islands is what they call the ABC Islands. That's Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao.
Thank you. Early next week, the system is forecast to move near or over western Cuba as a strengthening hurricane and then approach the Florida Peninsula at or near major hurricane strength, with the potential for significant impacts from storm surge, hurricane force winds, and heavy rainfall. While it is too soon to determine the exact magnitude and location of these impacts, residents in Cuba, the Florida Keys, and the Florida Peninsula should ensure that they have their hurricane plan in place and closely, and I mean closely, monitor the forecast updates through the weekend and into next week.
Absolutely goes without saying, the threat is building, and as we start to establish a more clear-cut track, it looks to me as though the Yucatan is now out of contention, and then it's going to end up being further east, lifting up, potentially through the Cayman Islands, and then onto western Cuba, and of course onto the Florida Peninsula. A large part of it as well would be underneath that storm if the NHC cone comes to pass. Now, as always, we are here to take questions. We're very happy to do that during our entire stream. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. I know a few people have done that already. We had a couple earlier, but I've lost them now. Chances of Fiona making a tropical landfall in Canada was one of them, though. That's a tough one, isn't it? It's going to be close. It's going to be close.
I would say, Nathan, the chances of Fiona maintaining tropical characteristics up to landfall is really riding on a razor-thin line. It would probably be similar to what Dorian did when it came through this area a few years ago, where it was riding that same razor-thin line of actually being tropical and post-tropical.
Oh, Dorian. All right. I believe we also have Marlene with us right now. You're in Canada, although on the other side, but you might have some more information about what's going on with the local agencies in Nova Scotia. Any news?
Just a second, let me switch to my, because, they have just storm surge warnings up for the Acadian Peninsula. Like pretty much everywhere where it's gonna initially go, they're gonna have about 6 to 8 feet of storm surge.
That's no small number. 6 to 8 feet.
No, that's not.
And that is to be expected when you have a storm at such a low pressure. This really remarkable The National Hurricane Center last night had it at 9:32. Now they have it at 9:36 again. I'm guessing that was backed by recon observations. Anyone know?
I believe it was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the basic summary information they have it at is location 34.1 degrees north, 64 degrees 0.9 west, about 1,165 kilometers southwest of Sable Island, maximum sustained winds of 204 kilometers an hour, and a minimum central pressure of 934.
Very
And that
powerful.
was as of 9 o'clock this morning, Atlantic time.
J.O. says, given Fiona could end up post-tropical at 920 to 930 millibars, is there a wind pressure relationship for non-tropical lows?
That is something I don't really know if that exists or not. I imagine it does. I'm not sure exactly what the correlation is. I think you would know better than I would, Nathan, given that you're in the UK and you deal with post-tropical cyclones more than I do here in the US.
I'm not sure. I guess when you get to higher latitudes, the wind pressure relationship becomes a lot more convoluted. With extratropical cyclones, I guess size helps in terms of a lower pressure, but usually it's ones that bomb out. I mean, for instance, when we had a 914 millibar Debrea storm in 1993, 914 millibars off the coast of Ireland, but it only had around 80-mile-an-hour winds. So it's very difficult to establish a wind pressure relationship for extratropical cyclones, considering that we've had 940 millibar extratropical storms that moved into the British Isles that had pressures that had winds of Category 3 force. So it's a tough one. I'm not really sure how to answer that. And do we think that 9L will be a Category 3 or more? Every chance is there for it.
I think that it's extremely high that we have a major hurricane. Personally, I'm thinking that we have a high chance of this becoming a major hurricane before Cuba, actually. Well, I mean, the ship's model forecasts a 60% chance for this to be a major hurricane in 3 days from now. 60% chance.
3 days from now, so that would be, let's check that graphic again, by Grand Cayman.
Yeah. And given the model guidance, Nathan, which you can see on my screen, they're very split at this point. Hard to say exactly where the system's going to go, but you can see here the Euro and the CMC are following the National Hurricane Center's forecast track. But I think models that have more of a grip on the storm, like the GFS, the HWRF, and the HMON, are a lot further west. And if the system takes that track, like those models are suggesting, that would lead to a much stronger storm, both into Cuba and into Florida.
Oh, without a doubt. Tim, I know you had the what's it called? The multi-panel thing earlier. Could we look at that?
Yeah, I have that, and I actually was able to find the key messages issued by the Canadian Hurricane Center as well. So I have all of those on standby.
Okay.
Whenever we're ready to look at all those.
Well, let's first look at the multi-panel on 9L, and we'll come back to Fiona in a moment. Do you have that now? I just want to check out what wind shear parameters we're looking at.
Yeah, for 9L. There we go, that's the right panel.
So
yeah, that and my wife is just calling me, so I apologize for the background audio there.
So look at that, the top right panel there showing the wind shear dropping like a rock in the next 24 hours and staying very low until it reaches Cuba, I think that is.
Yeah, pretty close there, and most of the models are definitely on board with this ramping up significantly after about the morning of the 25th. Definitely clear signs that it should be a minimal tropical storm. And then by the afternoon of the 26th, most of the models hinting that this could be a hurricane. And by the 27th, half of them, a pretty good chunk of them, think this could definitely be at least Category 2. HMON and HWRF being the bullish ones, thinking this could reach low in Category 4.
Interesting to see that by the end of that 5-day period, conditions seem to deteriorate in terms of higher wind shear and lower relative humidity, which I find interesting.
I think that the H-Wharf has a really good handle on this, because if you look at my screen at the simulated infrared imagery of 9L, so picture this in your mind just for a minute. Pretty well organized on the, well, I shouldn't really say that, but it's very sheared. Now we go back to how the storm looks now. I'll turn on the infrared here.
Wow. That's quite a close match.
That's why I think that the H-Wharf has a good handle on it. And what does the H-Wharf do? Well, off to the races with it. There it is, passing Grand Cayman.
Yeah.
Barely any impact with Cuba. Maybe we can hit 5 knots most. And major hurricane into the Gulf of Mexico. And look, last second curve right there. And if you extrapolate its track out, that would be a landfall north of Tampa, which could be disastrous consequences for the Bay Area if this one verifies. But of course, this is 5 days out,
And
if not more.
130 miles an hour there in that image.
It's probably a little bit stronger than that, probably.
And what about the HMON model?
Sure, we can power under that. Stronger storm in the Gulf of Mexico. Barely no impacts at all from the storm in western Cuba. And once
Straight to
again,
the
curving back
Central.
up there. Let me see if I can get a better look at the track. I know I have a website here somewhere where I can get it. I think it's here. Let's see if... where is it? Hopefully, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe curving right the last second, but still looks like a track into north of Tampa by the HMON.
Yikes.
Not good at all. There is something that I want to briefly mention that we haven't tapped on yet, Nathan, and it's this.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah, that is Tropical Storm Noru in the West Pac.
That is
Typhoon
one of the most forceful blow-ups in convection ever. It even produces a big gravity wave off to the northeast there. Wow. It's almost like a volcanic eruption.
That's a massive thunderstorm collapse and then blow up. I mean, you can just zoom out here and look. That's like the size of Luzon, practically.
I've not seen anything quite like that. That's like a volcanic eruption. Really intense blow-up in those clouds. This is a storm that's approaching the Philippines. Its local name is Carding, named Noru internationally. That's headed towards the Philippines in the next 48 hours, and we'll be covering that as well. Expected to be a strong tropical storm there and then become a typhoon in the South China Sea. We probably won't get to cover it very much at the moment, but we did produce a standalone video on this storm a few hours ago, if you want to take a look on our channel.
And then let me go to the other disappointment of the West Pac. I mean, I'm not even sure if I would call this a tropical storm, but here is quote-unquote tropical storm Talas.
But delivering very heavy rainfall to various parts of Japan. We're expecting probably 150 millimeters of further rainfall in some of those areas now.
I'm trying to see if there's even a center, and it looks like that it's there.
Yeah.
Still offshore. Is it forecast to make landfall at all?
We can't call that a TC anymore.
I wouldn't. It still is, but look at that. Look at that center's movement. That's due east. That's not going to make landfall. What's the wind shear like over this thing? Let me have a look at this.
Must be.
I know this isn't going to give us. I know that people are going to flame me for this, but this is Simus's shear map.
Oh, right.
Yeah, 25, 30, 40, 50. Approaching the storm right now. Unfavorable, regardless.
All right. So that's a little look at the Western Pacific. Probably the only look we'll be able to give it this hour. Back to Fiona, and if you've just joined us, here it is once again. If we look at expected impacts and timings of it, we're expecting it to happen fairly soon. The tropical storm force winds should arrive on the southern tip of Nova Scotia at about 6 or 7 p.m. this evening. and reach the northern tip of Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island at about 1 a.m. And then we will probably see about 2 or 3 a.m. the tropical storm force of winds will start arriving in Newfoundland, and will reach the northern tip of Newfoundland by Saturday afternoon. Already we're seeing significant rain totals or rain showers starting to appear over Nova Scotia right now, and let's go back to Tim, who you had all those key messages from the Canadian Hurricane Center. They'll know the hazards a lot better than we do here, so why don't you tell us what they have?
Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a mouthful because they got this broken down into about 3 different sections.
Well, whilst you're talking about that, we'll be looking at various imagery shots, so...
All right. So from the Canadian Hurricane Center, the public weather impacts and warnings, they're calling this a severe event for Atlantic Canada and eastern Quebec. Numerous weather models continue to indicate that Fiona will transition to a very powerful post-tropical storm as it makes landfall in eastern Nova Scotia early Saturday morning. Storm will produce heavy rainfall and severe winds. Latest guidance brings Fiona northward across Nova Scotia waters tonight, passing through Cape Breton Saturday morning, and then reaching the Quebec lower North Shore and southeastern Labrador early Sunday. Severe winds and rainfall will have major impacts across eastern Prince Edward Island, eastern Nova Scotia, southern and eastern New Brunswick, western Newfoundland, eastern Quebec, and southeastern Labrador. There will also be large waves for the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, eastern parts of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and a high likelihood of storm surge for parts of Nova Scotia, Gulf of St. Lawrence, and western Newfoundland. In terms of the wind impacts, most regions will experience hurricane force winds. These severe winds will be impacting the region late Friday and continue Saturday. Similar cyclones of this nature have produced structural damage to buildings. Construction sites may become particularly vulnerable. Wind impacts will be enhanced by foliage on the trees, potentially causing prolonged and widespread utility outages. Hurricane and tropical storm warnings are in effect for most of the areas. The rainfall forecast, according to the Canadian Hurricane Center, is that the rainfall will be significant, especially north and west of Fiona's track, where heavy rain could lead to flooding. Highest rainfall amounts are likely for eastern Nova Scotia, southwestern Newfoundland, and the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Forecast guides is suggesting widespread amounts of 100 to 200 millimeters, but closer to the path of Fiona, more than 200 millimeters is likely. Some districts have received large quantities of rain recently, and excessive runoff may exacerbate the flooding potential. Road washouts are also possible. Rainfall warnings are in effect for most of Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and southeastern New Brunswick. The storm surge and wave forecast for the Canadian Hurricane Center is large waves will reach the eastern shore of Nova Scotia from the south tonight and build to more than 10 meters. These waves will reach southern Newfoundland by Saturday morning and could be up to or exceeding possibly 12 meters. Some of the waves over eastern portions of the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the Cabot Strait could be higher than 12 meters. The western Gulf will see waves from the north up to 8 meters in places, which will probably cause significant erosion of north-facing beaches of Prince Edward Island, Ile de Madeline, and we'll also see some coastal erosion from the waves. Coastal flooding will also be a threat for these areas. The highest risk for coastal flooding will be a combination of storm surge with larger waves moving onshore. There could be some coastal flooding for the St. Lawrence estuary and the Quebec lower North Shore. For most of the areas, the higher water levels will be near high tide sometime on Saturday morning. Storm surge warnings are in place for the Gulf of St. Lawrence, southwestern Newfoundland, eastern Nova Scotia, and the east coast of New Brunswick. And that's pretty much their key messages from the Canadian Hurricane Center.
And here is some geocolor imagery of that storm right now, and we'll be able to take a look at some of the other ones as well on these graphics. So there is Fiona, and very impressive prowess about it. You see the little hook-shaped island there, Bermuda. It's passed pretty close there, delivering possibly hurricane force winds, but certainly major hurricane force gusts. over the last few hours.
You know, when you're in the backup, you're supposed to
And
look over your shoulder.
that's Marlene talking in the background there. You might want to mute yourself. And we're also looking here at Gaston, which is still looking interesting, although rather disheveled. Still delivering tropical storm force winds to the Azores. Here is, let's bring that into the frame properly, Tropical Depression 9L, which is the one that everyone's talking about for potential impacts in the United States and of course for Cuba and the Caymans. And we don't yet have any imagery for 10L, but we saw it earlier on Ethan's map. So that's the 4 systems that are currently active in the Atlantic Ocean, and another area of interest in the main development region, just in case things weren't busy enough, that is also active as well. Ethan, where do you want to go to next? You want to talk some more about 9?
I guess I can. We can go to the models if you want.
Sure.
Right, let's pull up the... Oh, that's good. 12Z GFS is coming out. That's good. Really good. So we'll go to the 6Z HWRF. Looks to be that it develops the system quite nicely into tropical storm intensity fairly soon. Weakens it a little bit as it passes south of Jamaica there. Very interesting. And then really rapidly intensifying, bypassing Grand Cayman to the southwest. Major hurricane landfall in western Cuba there, probably, most likely. And rapidly intensifying once it gets on the other side. It's very worth noting, and I'll pull up here, this western side of Cuba that this storm is forecast to pass over is not that mountainous, and it's very tiny. So land interaction with this, although there is some mountains in this area, it's going to be very brief and very limited.
Now hold on a minute. The HWRF and the HMON runs then are probably not even in the National Hurricane Center cone, are they?
That's what I've been talking about in the public server. You can see there the HWRF passes over the storm over this very western end of Cuba. When we go back to the forecast cone, it's just maybe inside or outside, but the HMON is completely outside the NHC's cone, and you'll see here in a second.
So can we trust these models at all then?
I would, honestly. I would. I don't see why the NHC haven't considered it in their forecast cone because of the HWRF's near perfect initialization. I'm not sure why they haven't done that, but going over to the
probably
HMON.
have, Ethan. What the NHC does is with their forecast guidance, they usually take about the 67th percentile of their forecast, and that's what they use to make their cones. So that westward shift is probably in that other 33% of the forecast that the NHC has in their back pocket, but for publicity's sake, they usually don't use that other third of their forecasting cone.
It'll be interesting to see what the GFS does then at the upcoming update that it's started to run. We'll probably get that full data. It's probably only going to be about 40 minutes from now, so it won't be whilst we're on the air today. But we will be back again later this evening to talk more about this storm and Fiona as it makes landfall in Canada. Let's get to all these questions then. How long has it been since the west coast of Florida got hit by a Category 3 or stronger storm?
Last one. I mean, you could consider technically Irma to be one, but you remember, the thing is about Irma in this question is Irma, when it was approaching from the east, it never really was certain that it was going to go up the west coast like it ended up doing. A lot of the models were just in the east coast, not like this storm, but the last time that we had a storm really come in, moving northeast into the Florida peninsula that struck as a major hurricane was Charlie, 2004. It has been that long. Well, no, Wilma. It's Wilma. Forgot about Wilma.
Wilma. Wow.
Charlie's the last Cat 4. Wilma's the last Cat 3.
Where was the west coast begin then from the Florida Panhandle down? Because, you know, we've had some strong storms up there.
It probably begins around East Point, probably. Maybe even Cedar Key, and down probably towards the Fort Myers, Naples area. But I did my research, Nathan, and you won't believe this. The last major hurricane to strike the Florida coast between Cedar Key and Tampa well, basically the Florida Peninsula north of Tampa here. The last major hurricane to make landfall in this area, 1950. I'm not kidding. 1950 was the last one.
I guess it's not a huge surprise. It is hard to get a storm in there around there as a major.
Yeah, I guess you're right there.
It's a bit like Georgia, isn't it?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but
I suppose, given you can get the homegrown stuff in the Gulf, but
I've got the HMON model loaded here, and I just want to go over this here just for a minute. So there it is, the system, much farther towards the southwest than the H4 predicts. Bypassing Cuba, not that much interaction, actually probably none at all with Cuba, which really allows the system to intensify much more in the Gulf of Mexico. 145, 150 miles per hour storm in the Gulf of Mexico on the HMON model. Let's see if I can pull up the H4 run here. I hope it has what I'm looking for, and it doesn't. Fantastic.
great.
Right, so let's go to the HMON, because I was hoping that it has it too. Does it? It does, okay. Look at all this rain that's possible from this system.
Oh yes, I was checking this, and we're looking at pretty high rain amounts in this storm when it forms, over Florida as well in the longer range from the GFS. But that's HMON suggesting, what, 16 inches?
Yeah, I'll pull up the GFS here. This is going to be the 60 run. Where is it? It's here somewhere. I know that it's under here somewhere. I think it's...
Total precipitation, Ethan.
There it is. And we'll go out to 7 days from now.
That's what I always do on my forecasts.
Wow, look at that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder where the track of this hurricane is. We'll just get some probes on this. That is
20 inches.
directly over the Orlando area too. That's gonna lead to some bad
Oh
flooding
my!
over there.
Oh no.
That's gonna be some bad flooding. 20 inches of rainfall from the system over there. That's gonna lead to catastrophic flooding in that area. I'm not trying to sound like I'm overhyping things, but that is with like this metro area, and I've been in the Orlando area, so there is a lot of urbanization area over here, and urban areas are very prone to flooding. So that obviously it's just one model solution. I wouldn't take this with absolute uncertainty, but that is just one model solution. But in general, you can see here anywhere in the red areas is 10 inches or more of rainfall, and that really follows the whole Interstate 4 corridor on this run northward, northeast from Tampa up towards Daytona Beach. And even we have back here this 25-inch pocket back here, and this could easily go on land. That's the thing. And you've got down here back in Cuba, still 10 inches of rainfall. This is like I said before, this isn't really an overly mountainous area like central or eastern Cuba is, but this is still a little bit mountainous, and that could lead to some mudslide/landslide problems even there.
Oh yeah.
And we still can see some rainfall even on portions of northeastern Central America, Jamaica, maybe even southern Hispaniola, central Cuba from this system too.
Yep, definitely going to be a rain threat as well as the potential wind threat. More questions then. Ethan Plays says, it's not you, is it, Ethan?
No, it's not.
What landfall intensity do you think it will be? Well, that is a real shot in the dark question right now.
I know that the 12Z H4 and HMON are scheduled to run pretty soon. 12Z GFS already is actually running. So I'll be looking over all of the data very, very soon. And I've actually planned to get a forecast cone out very soon on this system. So you have to look on our Twitter outlets around probably 1 p.m. Eastern for the latest forecast cone that I'll be probably producing.
Sandy says, if the NHC track holds in spot, what could the winds be in Tampa Bay and storm surge?
We can look here. I know that the NHC has a graphic here. Where is it? Of wind speed probabilities. That's for Fiona.
Yeah, you're on.
I'm sorry. Let's see. There it is. So here is the chance of tropical storm force winds. You can see there in Tampa, only getting up to really to 30 to 40% right now. It's probably higher than that though.
It's really just because of low confidence.
Yeah. But hurricane force wind speeds, they are there. They aren't zero, but they're fairly low. Low confidence in anything in the southeastern Gulf right now.
1 in 10 shot right now.
Yep, but if I had to guess, probably Tampa's going to get at least tropical storm force winds at least.
And there's all of those systems presented on the map there. Super says, imagine if Fiona was 1,500 kilometers in size. That would be crazy. It probably not. Isn't far from that size.
No, it isn't.
When you measure it north to south, Fiona's influence is probably 2,000 kilometers.
Yeah. Real quick, I just wanted to see what the... Is that what I think it is? Is that from Noru?
Yep. And
That's from Noru?
I covered this earlier on
Holy
a video.
cow, how much rainfall is that? Oh
my.
42 inches. Wow.
Let's see if we can get higher.
Yep.
Like close to 43 inches there. That's crazy.
But
that is some...
also an uncertain forecast there. That sort of suggests that Noru's remnants linger around for a long time. There's also another large tropical cyclone that forms in that 7-day period in the South China Sea, and you can make that out there. Yep.
Yeah, right there. I can see it. So yeah, that's something that needs to be watched closely. In regards of heavy rainfall, you can barely see. I almost did it again. It's Newton.
Tropical storm Newton, which is probably going to get the least attention today.
Unfortunately, but you can barely depict its rainfall track, and then you got this system here, which is not going to inform at all. But I know that a lot of people might be asking, where could 9L go after the Florida Peninsula? Does any of our team have any thoughts on that at all?
From what I've been seeing, I know the latest GFS earlier was calling for it to just stall off the coast of Florida and pretty much die. And then, well, it would still be a weak tropical storm, then it loops around and does some weird track, so I'm not sure.
Wow.
I mean, that is possible. I'm just having a look on my screens here. Euro takes this thing up towards the northeast, down to 953 millibars, making landfall in North Carolina.
Oh my goodness.
And then what looks to be... No, that this can't be true. Is that what I think it is? Yes, a hurricane landfall in New England, too, from the Euro. That's just one model, of course. And then you have some other models like the... I'll show it here.
Some Planet Crazy then.
Yeah, some models like the Canadian. What the heck is that? Oh, there's 9L.
Hold on a minute.
But you can see... Well,
where's 9L going there? Does it go along the west coast?
No, it curves up into South Carolina. Well, it does, actually, yeah. And it speeds out to the northeast. So that's just one solution.
That would be a weird one.
6Z GFS. Curves the system in near Tampa. Stalls it off the coast. And loops it back south.
Wow. Whoa, what's that? Trying to reform again, maybe? That looked weird.
I hope not.
Whatever that was.
We can look at the nav gem here. I know that it's very unrealistic. Landfall in Tampa, but nothing beyond that.
Still.
Let's look at the ensembles. Let's see what they suggest. Well, there's that. That doesn't help much at all.
But you can still see the spread of those on... Oh dear, look at that. That's how much uncertainty we still have on this storm right now.
Yeah, which is why I don't get why the NHC have gone so far east on their forecast cone. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Trying to figure it out myself. I don't know.
Well,
of course they value some models more than others, and they've got probably their own assessment of... I mean, what would be steering Florida? What would be steering 9L?
Once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, what's going to be causing it to turn northwards like that?
Well, I can actually show you. I don't remember which product it is. I think it's this one that we want. But it's the 850 millibar winds that we really want. And you'll be able to see why. And so here comes our hurricane in. And you can see here we're going to have this large trough that's going to dip over down from Canada over the Great Lakes region and out over the northeast U.S.
Big dip
And
in
that's
the
going to
jet
be
stream.
and that's going to be what's going to help bring the system off towards the northeast.
But
Now,
that isn't
what
what
actually?
what starts the turn, though, is it?
No, I don't think it is. I'm not that in depth into this kind of stuff.
Well, I'm just
so
looking at. I
don't
mean,
know.
I guess it doesn't look like there's much to do with steering, so I imagine it's just going along its. Hurricanes always try to go poleward if there's nothing blocking the way.
If anything,
Yeah.
Nathan, just looking at the GFS run, yeah, we do have that that feature that Ethan is referring to, but there does support a weak high pressure right off the coast of the Outer Banks before it weakens and collapses 3 days out, and that
There it
might be
goes.
enough of a linchpin to start bringing it northward.
Yeah, it's probably that in the absence of anything else. More comments here. Brandon says, any chance TD9 repositions its center under the convection to the west of its current center?
We're just about to talk about that a center relocation is entirely possible given the storm's current environment. We need to watch out very closely for this because any center relocation to the southwest could lead to a much farther southwest track. So we need to watch very closely for that. Some models like the H1 and HWRF show this occurring, and typically we do see a center relocation in this kind of environment, so we need to watch very closely. But another thing that I want to mention real quick, Nathan, is the NHC's key messages have come up for Fiona.
Okay.
And this is what they say. Fiona is expected to affect portions of Atlantic Canada as a powerful hurricane-force cyclone tonight and into Saturday, and significant impacts from high winds, storm surge, and heavy rainfall are expected. Hurricane and tropical storm warnings are in effect. Tropical storm conditions will likely continue for a few more hours on Bermuda, if they aren't over already. And large swells generated by Fiona are expected to cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions along much of the east coast of the United States, the Bahamas, Bermuda, and Atlantic Canada during the next couple of days. So, we could see Fiona all the way up here in this Bay Area. I forget what it's called. Someone can correct me with that. But since it's hurricane, it's going to be just so large, we can still see its influence affect a large part of the rip current here all along the East Coast, all the way down towards Miami, Florida. That just shows how massive of an impact this hurricane is going to have, even though that it's just going to be just a local Canada thing. Its impact is going to be spread far wide across the basin.
We'll be talking about it quite a lot there, Ethan. That area of water, that's the Gulf of St. Lawrence, north of Nova Scotia.
Thank you.
Jo says chances of TD9 becoming a Category 5 like the 1932 Cuba hurricane.
Entirely possible. I wouldn't rule it out.
Wasn't that the November one?
I think it was.
Or was
think
that
it was.
1924? I can't remember.
But that hurricane had a much different environment than this one does. But either way, the system does have a chance to become a Category 5 if everything goes right for the storm. Everything has to go right for the storm, and it has to take the right track. But at this time, I'd probably give that a really low percentage chance of happening.
And it definitely won't happen after Cuba.
Well,
I'm saying
I
it
don't
now.
know.
It won't happen after Cuba.
I don't know.
Well,
We've still
unless it's going through the Yucatan Channel. But if it follows that NHC track, it won't happen after Cuba.
No. If it follows the NHC track as it is right now, no chance of Category 5 intensity from this.
Yeah.
Unless it does like some magic explosive intensification thing prior to Cuba. But
Well, yeah, that's it. Well, no, that could be a possibility. We know what the oceanic heat content is like this year.
Yeah,
it's very
Yeah,
prime.
it is through the roof in this area, Nathan. I actually have that graphic up.
I have the sea surface
wow.
under control.
Oh, look
Holy
at that
cow.
area. It's all crikey.
right into it. Oh my goodness. And even if it tracks further west,
that's worse than I
it's
thought.
going to go over more ocean heat content.
That's worse than I thought. Possibility for explosive intensification over a large area there.
And then while you still have my screen up, Nathan, we can take a look at the diagnostic for it. And yeah, it's going to have 0 wind shear as it's going through that ocean heat content. So
Oh my.
This could be a perfect setup for a very powerful system in a very short time.
Not to say that it will absolutely happen. Of course, I'm reminded of, there were so many, I forget which one it was, one of the 2020 storms that had perfect conditions to be a Wilma and it didn't. Was it Delta?
Yes.
Might have been, yeah.
So you just never quite know, but it doesn't, it's not a good omen right now. More comments. Could Nauru cross over into the North Indian Ocean like Matmo did in 2019? No, I don't think so. And I'm just catching up with more comments. Cyclone Tracking Oz sends us 2 messages of support. What's the chance of a major hurricane from 9L? And a commendation about our coverage, which we all appreciate, I'm sure.
What was the question there? A chance of major hurricane from 9L?
I think it was. Yeah.
Almost guaranteed, if you ask me. Almost guaranteed.
It's clearly over 50% if the
It's
NHC
very
are
likely.
forecasting it.
I mean, I could pull up the intensity guidance, but I'm pretty sure most of us already seen it. Most models take it to at least a Category 3 peak. So, in my opinion, I think that it's very likely that you see, very likely, if not guaranteed, possibly that you see a major hurricane out of this. But again,
I would just like to mention that I know that there's been a lot of news media already calling this 9L that is Hermine, or potentially what could become Hermine. I wouldn't go that far yet because we have tropical depression
another
10
system.
back in the eastern Atlantic that could actually steal Hermine from 9L. So right now it truly is the race for Hermine, and the next name after that would be Ian, followed by Julia if 99L gets that. And then what's the next name after that? I believe it's Carl, right?
Is that still going?
I think so.
Just circling all of the areas of interest right now, 5 of them in the Atlantic. This one here is Fiona. This one, Gaston. This one, number 9. And this one, number 10. And this is an AOI in the middle here. What's that?
Number 10, Tropical Depression 10 is looking really
We've got
good right
some
now.
breaking news here.
Yes?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Mateo, France had designated an area of interest in the Southwest Indian Ocean.
I thought it was going to be NHC then. You scared us a bit.
I apologize.
Bruh. Okay, back to this.
Well, we're about to finish up here, but we got to get through more questions because we haven't taken enough. Some quick fire questions then. Ali Egg says, will 9L have like a Wilma type effect to Florida?
No.
No, it'll be smaller than that. What are your thoughts on the GFS model run for Hermine when it forms? Well, it might not, as we've mentioned, but you never know. We'll just call it 9L. And the model runs
pull it back up again.
Are believable, to be honest.
Although, Nathan, 12Z GFS is running right now low 950s into Western Cuba from the GFS.
Still
running. Track
was like
as
that
far
before,
as
though. Track's gone west, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
Don't think it has. Let me just look.
It looks like it's in line with the HWRF.
Yeah, here's 6Z, there's 12Z, so it's a little bit farther southwest.
Oh, no.
Same pressure though. So that is some consistency from the GFS. So that is quite alarming, if you ask me.
More questions. Is 9L going to hit Houston? I think we can clearly say no at this point.
No.
Will Fiona become a superstorm like Sandy? Doubt.
No, but I have seen that it's going to merge with some post-tropical system, and that's really what's going to make it become large, but its impact are not going to be like Sandy at all.
Does 9L have a chance to curve back into the Delmarva like Agnes did?
Yes, honestly, it
Yes.
does.
I think so. And Brandon wants you to look at the 12Z icon model.
I'm not going to look
Okay,
at that
I'll
because
pull
I
it
don't
up.
care. The
You
icon
don't
is garbage
care?
or crap.
No,
Icon
look.
is
Have a
garbage.
look. You've been asked
Okay,
to have a look.
fine. Well, let's have a look.
Alright, so first things first.
Load the whole thing first. There it is. So it takes it south of Jamaica there. Really following the NHC track into Cuba. Much farther, much
They
sharper
stalled it for a
curve
long
to
time, and
southern Florida.
Oh,
W- w-
what? They stalled. I mean,
Why?
whoa.
Why? 944 millibars off towards the north with a good outflow channel to the south and the north. Strike for the icon.
dangerous.
And then you have another system that attempts to develop up in the northern Atlantic with a high ridge.
Another question, we've got to have the balance. Is there a chance that 9L could flop?
Yes.
There's
Yes,
always
there
a
is.
chance that any storm can flop.
Although the chance of it actually happening is incredibly small. It is there. It's just not as big as, say, other storms. Which is truly a unfortunate thing.
Gee whiz.
I mean, you can see here on the GEFS ensemble, some do take it into Central America, but a large majority take it up towards the Gulf. So there is that chance of it still going into Central America, but the chance of that happening is very, very low now, really unfortunately. I would really honestly like a situation like that happen, because it would limit the amount of impacts that the storm would have.
And with that, we're going to finish up our coverage here on this hour of discussion. We hope it's been useful and informative. Force 13 will be back with more extensive coverage on Hurricane Fiona as it makes landfall in Canada tonight, along with whatever happens with 9L. No doubt we're going to be running lots and lots of coverage on that throughout the next few days. A major situation unfolding for Atlantic Canada right now. Hurricane Fiona back to Category 4 status, with 130 mile per hour winds sustained and a pressure of 936 millibars. 9L might get a name soon in the Caribbean Sea. Tropical depression now forecasted to hit Florida as a major hurricane, Category 3, in 5 days' time from the National Hurricane Center. Updates available on our channels on YouTube. Subscribe to Force 13 if you haven't already for more updates, and our social media platforms on Facebook and Twitter. But in the meantime, we're gonna go off the air for a few hours, and we'll be back on here at, trying to figure out what time it is, local time, Eastern time. It will be 6 p.m. Thank you, Ethan, in my ear there. 6 p.m. we'll be back live with more coverage on all of the Atlantic activity. Until then, stay tuned, and if you are in the cone of 9L, National Hurricane Center said it, start to get your emergency kits prepared. But that's all from us here. We'll be back at 6.